talk a little bit about the ESA bill itself, the specific legislation, what it offers to families.
So it's based on income level. The way it passed and then the way the governor went and vetoed it, it affects the income levels. But so in Wyoming, we're not allowed to give public money to individuals except for in need of the poor. If we look at our SNAP program, our food stamp program, or Medicaid, or CHIP, we were looking at some of the different levels of these programs to find some constitutional backing. And that's really what the governor did. He took the 150%, which matches one of the programs. I'm definitely going to fight to try to increase that to at least the 200%, because I see there's some legal basis to do that. But this is going to give families education. If they want to do distance education or homeschool or private, and they meet the economic thresholds, it's going to give them some choices and opportunities that they just don't have otherwise.
Americans are capable of achieving extraordinary things when they have the freedom and opportunity to do so. This is American Potential. And here's your host, Jeff Crank.
Well, thanks for being with us on another episode of American Potential. Thanks for joining us. The growing nature of our podcast and so many people watching it on YouTube, our YouTube channel, American Potential. You can go there and watch these videos in full video. And we'd love to have you do that. And if not, if you're driving in your car, don't watch it in full video. If you're driving in your car, just listen, of course, on any podcast platform. And we just so appreciate so many of us, this podcast growing leaps and bounds. So thanks for being with us. Look, we've talked a lot about education. And, since COVID happened, we've talked a ton about ESAs, or education savings accounts, and how they are really blossoming all across the United States and state after state, to the point where I have argued that those states that don't enact ESAs will be left behind 5 or 10 years from now. The states that are resisting that change and parental involvement and empowerment, they will be the states that are left behind. And so many states really advancing the ball on ESAs. And education's just become a hot topic, as so many states starting to expand that educational freedom to families by offering education savings accounts. So we've done lots of episodes on the topic with families from states like Utah and West Virginia who are using an ESA for their child so they can be in the learning environment that works for them. And that's what ESAs are all about. And we're adding another state, an episode to this list now. The cowboy state of Wyoming is one of the newest states that is offering families more educational options. So how did this bill get passed, and what has happened to it since it passed? Today we have two guests on the podcast to discuss the new ESA bill in Wyoming. Now, our first guest is Vanessa Gemar, who is the principal of St. John Paul II Catholic School, and Wyoming State Representative Ken Clouston. Representative and Vanessa, thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Jeff, for having us.
Yeah, good morning. Excited to be here with you.
Yeah, you bet. Now, first of all, I understand you two. I mean, I would expect nothing less. Wyoming isn't a gigantic state, right? There's not a lot of people in Wyoming. I love Wyoming. It's just to the north, of course, of Colorado, and I visit there often and have family that lives in Wyoming. But Vanessa, you're neighbors with the representative's brother, and Vanessa's son, as I understand it, took golf lessons from the representative's son. Is that all right? Do I have this right?
Yes, that is correct. Yes.
Okay, so it's a small world, right?
Yeah, definitely.
It is, and the student's better than the teacher right now. So I guess I can be proud of that.
Gotcha. Well, look, I was somewhat involved with helping in the passage of this, a very small part, particularly last year when we tried to get it through the legislative session and then ended up working with the Speaker of the House. It became his bill this year. But Vanessa, let's talk about this a little bit. You're the principal of a school in Wyoming. Talk about your school and how you have been able to help students.
Sure. Yes. So our school, St. John Paul II Catholic School, we serve 176 students this year. usually averages 176 to 180. We have preschool ages starting at 3 years old with full-time preschool all the way through sixth grade. And it's just been a real blessing. I've had the opportunity to work both in public school and in private schooling, and it's been the greatest blessing to be the principal at John Paul II and to see just the opportunities, the hardships that parents do go through in order for their kids to get to come to school here, but then the opportunities that it does provide for our schools and for our families as well too.
So obviously this ESAs break the mold, right, of the old traditional school that you have to go to school in your zip code. But so do private schools. Private schools have always been breaking that mold, right? The private schools have been the option that if parents say, well, I don't want to send my kid based on a zip code, I want to send my kid to a school that actually addresses their needs. They've always had that option. ESAs are a way to get that option to every parent. That's kind of the way I look at this. Talk about maybe your school, and I'm sure you have examples of some kids who maybe were in a traditional school and then came to your school and are just really excelling.
Well, yes, I can definitely speak to that and in my own personal experience within that. So my son, Drew, was a third grader at a public school that I had previously worked at as well, too. And Drew was, definitely one of those kids that in a large classroom just maybe kind of faded in with the rest of the kiddos. But he wasn't thriving. He wasn't loving going to school every day. And it just became a real battle to get him to go to school. And on my end, there was definitely some doors that were just being closed. And so our eyes started opening to other options. And John Paul II being one of those. And so as we came here, I, as an educator, just truly loved working within the smaller class sizes. But on the mother end of things, I got to see Drew just truly gain confidence and flourish, being at a smaller school and just having a more family style setting for him. So I see that happen often with other families as well, too. Some that begin their journey with us, that start off with their little ones, their 3-year-olds, and they just find themselves loving the close-knit family community, wanting their kids to continue on that journey through elementary school. And I also have kiddos that come just like Drew and I did, where in the middle of their elementary career, they're just needing a little different option and come for different reasons and thrive here as well.
So when you first heard about this ESA bill, what were your thoughts? What did you think about it before you really knew probably too much about what the actual bill itself was?
Yeah, so my goal has always been, since being here, that any child that wants to come here can be able to come regardless of their financial means. And so, we do things through fundraising and then different scholarship avenues to try to provide that. But in looking at the ESA bill, myself and the other Catholic school principals, we felt like was a real opportunity for our schools, and that more kids would be able to have that opportunity to come.
That's great. Now, Representative Clouston, you sit on the Education Committee. Talk about what you must obviously have great interest in education. Why'd you want to serve on the Education Committee?
Twice I was elected to our local school board, and then I also served on the State Board of Education for Wyoming. So it's kind of a natural fit for me. I'm really proud of Wyoming schools. 2 years ago, the NAEP scores, Wyoming was ranked 4th in the country, the very best of all the Western states. So, education is a huge part of Wyoming's history, and over 70% of our local property taxes go to education. So it's a great committee to get to serve on and get to kind of influence the future of Wyoming.
So there's lots of folks who I think very wrongly make the argument that ESAs attack public schools or take funding away from public schools, those sorts of things. I mean, obviously, you're very proud of the public school system in Wyoming. You just stated that and talked about some of the benefits of what they've done over the years. Have you found folks that are resistant to this change with the ESA bill, Representative?
Oh, definitely. I think people don't really understand the importance of an ESA. Wyoming's really rural. This ESA gives opportunities to people who live in a geographical area that it's hard to go to public school, and there's other reasons as well. But we wrote this bill. None of the funds for this come out of the education accounts. It comes out of the general fund. So we want to be real specific on that to avoid some constitutional issues and just also not to take anything away from our public education.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about the ESA bill itself, the specific legislation, what it offers to families.
So it's based on income level. The way it passed and then the way the governor went and vetoed it, it affects the income levels. But so in Wyoming, we're not allowed to give public money to individuals except for in need of the poor. And that's kind of how, when we look at our SNAP program, our food stamp program, or Medicaid, or CHIP, we were looking at some of the different levels of these programs to find some constitutional backing. And that's really what the governor did. He took the 150%, which matches one of the programs. I'm definitely going to fight to try to increase that to at least the 200%, because I see there's some legal basis to do that. But this is going to give families education. They want to do distance education or homeschool or private, and they meet the economic thresholds. It's going to give them some choices and opportunities that they just don't have otherwise.
Yeah. Let me ask this question. I mean, the Wyoming Constitution way better than I do, and I understand that's a provision in it. But I guess I don't understand why, if you're just allowing a parent the option of taking money that they're allocated for their child's education, why wouldn't it be a violation of that provision of Wyoming's Constitution to give it to them for public education at their public schools all of these years? Why would this be different? I guess I just don't understand that. All it is giving them an option to do it. They still have to do it, correct? They still have to educate their kids in the state of Wyoming.
Yeah, absolutely. They still have to educate them. We put in, there's still accountability. They need to still take some of the state testing or some nationally normed testing. So that's there. Again, it's just the way the Wyoming Constitution was set up, that no public dollars except for need of the poor. So that's really where the constitutional fight has come in. And it's been looked at before. So following the Constitution, that's, kind of how the governor vetoed it. And that's what we'll try to increase the limits against a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was disappointed to see the governor do that. I think the means testing aspect of it, and I get it. He believes, I think that is how it complies with the Wyoming Constitution. I wish he would have been a little bit more bold and just gone for it. And maybe sometimes you challenge that and make the argument that it isn't giving money to families. It's just allowing them to have a choice, just as if almost you gave them a choice in health care or something to go to one doctor over another. They should be able to choose their schools too. Do you see it that way, more the way I see it, or more the way the governor sees it, Representative?
That's a toughie. I want these families to have choices.
Sure.
Like I said, I'm in favor of our public schools, but it's not for everybody, right? So
right.
If they can get an education that meets maybe more of their religious views or, their family situation, I think that's important. And I think we do have a responsibility to help out families and give them more choices. So, I love the means testing, the way we'd set it up on different income levels. I'm excited we got this off the ground and started. Starting small, I think we can run a great program in the beginning, and then we can build it up in the years to come.
Yeah. Do you ultimately support, and I get there's this Wyoming constitutional provision, but do you support obviously expanding that means testing and making it, sounds like you do already, making it 200% or whatever. But does there have to be a means test on it in your mind in Wyoming?
I think the chances of it succeeding, the means testing is important. We had debated this in committee for a long time. In committee, we had come up with, we thought 300% of the poverty level was justifiable. The speaker thought it was 250%. And again, we've got some legal backing that says 200% for sure. So I think we'll expand it. I think the means testing based on income level is a little bit more palatable for the rest of the public. That way, we have, billionaires, in the western part of our state. Should they be getting the same amount of money as someone who's, definitely impoverished? So that's up for debate. I mean, they're paying taxes too. So I guess we'll see how the years come.
Yeah. I mean, this is a great debate. I mean, I will make this argument. Look, I live in the state of Colorado where, the legislature here and the governor have resisted all of this. So we don't have ESAs. We used to be really good on charter schools, and still are pretty good on charter schools, but they've just resisted the ESAs. And I've made the argument that Colorado is going to be, again, in 5 or 10 or 15 years, Colorado is going to be just left behind because they're this institutionalized educational system that we've had, while all the other states around it, Arizona and Wyoming and Utah and others have passed ESAs. I think that's just going to be very telling in the future. I also believe that, though, for states like Arizona, which has no means testing, they have universal ESAs now, which is great. And I think that's going to draw people and employers and others to their state. So, I'd love to see it move to universal, but I get it. And I'm really proud of Wyoming for taking this next step because it wasn't an easy thing to do. I mean, Representative, you had this in the legislature last year and it didn't pass, right? So this wasn't an easy thing to do. It took some real courage to do it.
Yeah, it was quite a fight. I mean, at one point, the Senate had stripped my bill completely,
right?
To the point I didn't want to put my name on it anymore.
Right.
But we brought it back. We brought it back in the House. We met in conference committee and kind of worked out a great compromise. And I think you'll just see this kind of expand slowly over time. And it brings competition, right?
Yep.
I think our public schools, we need to reward our high performing teachers better. And I think being in private business, I try to do the same thing. So
right.
I think you're going to see a lot of benefits of ESA actually to the public schools as well.
What were some of the things that they put in that Senate version of the bill that you didn't agree with?
Well, they severely expanded the means testing all the way to 500% of poverty level, which we knew the governor would veto that and that would get his attention. So something I didn't want, but we had to compromise it. So I had a strong feeling, he would veto at least some of the levels, not as deep as he did, but they also took away all the accountability pieces. They also stripped out the pre-kindergarten part, which to me is very important. 90% of our brains are developed by age 5. And we hear over and over from our teachers that so many of these children come from situations where they've, had really nobody reading to them, teaching colors or numbers. And it puts not only them, but the whole class behind. So that got stripped out too. And that pre-kindergarten piece was very important to me and to the Speaker of the House.
Right. Yeah. And so all that stuff got put in. The bill actually was kind of resurrected from the dead, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So if we would have kept the Senate piece, I was going to, encourage the House to vote no and bring it back next year.
Right. Well, I'm glad that you were able to move the ball forward and get it passed. It's a real testament to the process and what you all did. Vanessa, you were planning to testify in the committee hearing. Is that right?
I actually wasn't planning to testify that day. I came down. So the other Catholic school principals had told me about, just some education that the American Prosperities was offering. So we went down in November, and I was really going down just to learn more about the process and to provide more support in any way that I possibly could. And so, it was honestly, it's been such a great learning opportunity for myself, how all of this process works. And just, I have such a great respect for Mr. Clouston and all of those that serve in this way, because it is difficult work for sure. So you actually, and I looked at my notes incorrectly, you were not planning on testifying. You had no plans to testify, but did you end up testifying? Yes. And so, I had no plans of testifying. Right. And so after the first day, we had really learned, just the process of everything. The next morning, it's funny, I woke up and I just felt it being placed on my heart. And so I started writing some things down. And as I showed up that morning, they had asked me to share my story with that. And so we worked on, compiling our stories and finding our voice within that, and then ended up testifying later that day.
Yeah. And Representative, let me just go back to you quickly on that. I mean, this is something that average citizens sometimes don't understand the impact that their testimony has. I mean, their testimony in many ways is better than expert testimony from someone else coming in, right? When you're able to hear from, someone who runs a school or a parent or something like that, that has great impact, particularly in the education committee, right?
Absolutely. And, and with Miss Gemar, we have someone who's a parent, a teacher, a principal. I mean, she's really an expert at a bunch of different levels. And the committee really listened to her. And I can tell you, I get excited about politics and I enjoy it. I love the process. But it's fun seeing people like Vanessa coming in, and all of a sudden they get excited about the process and they learn really how it works and the influence that they can have on the system. And Wyoming's a citizen legislature. I live 5 houses from Vanessa. So having her come there and speak, it really means a lot to have your local people there fighting for something they believe in. Yeah.
Vanessa, what would you say to someone who might be intimidated to testify, who might say, well, I've never done this before. What would your argument to them be?
Yeah, definitely. I would just say everyone has a voice, right? And so, and there are, I really valued the training and the education piece that we got, with Tyler and his crew. But even just reaching out to different representatives and, asking questions and voicing, as different, one of the things that was really helpful is that one of our other Catholic school principals, Dr. Whalen, she would really keep us informed as to where the bill was. And then if there were times where we should reach out to others. And so her leadership within that was grateful on my end too. But really, I guess at the end of the day, anyone who feels passionate and has a voice, their voice can be heard within that. And there's just different avenues to do that.
Yeah, right. Now, the Tyler you mentioned is Tyler Lindholm, who is the state director of Americans for Prosperity. I actually hired Tyler, and he's a heck of a guy. I mean, I think he's doing a great job in the role. I actually call him Woody because he kind of reminds me of Woody from Toy Story a little bit. Does he remind either of you?
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
I want to pull his boot up one day and see if Andy is written on the bottom of the boot. I don't know if it is. But anyway, no, Tyler is a great guy, and he really worked hard, a former legislator himself, to make sure that ESAs got through. And obviously there's many other groups besides Americans for Prosperity that worked on it. And they helped build a coalition, or were part of a coalition. So kudos to Tyler, I think, for working with it. And, in Wyoming, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, Representative, in Wyoming, it's still done kind of the old fashioned way, right? It's kind of your word is your bond, and, people just are honest with each other. And it's really kind of refreshing to see a legislature work the way the Wyoming legislature works. Any thoughts on that, Representative?
Absolutely. Like, I really enjoy working with Tyler. Him and I agree on most things, but not everything. But him and I are both professional enough. We'll just tell each other, I'll support you on this or I won't. And that's just part of our belief system. But end of the day, we're still friends. We can talk on policies. And I guess with the Senate, we had worked this bill for a full year in committee in the interim and had come to a compromise. And then when people on the Senate Education Committee stripped out all the compromises, it kind of goes back to what you're saying. Like, don't support me in committee and in public, and then all of a sudden when you get the chance, strip a bill. So that, when I said personally upsetting, that's where that came from. So we got to hold people to their word and just be honest with everybody, but be respectful. In this age of politics, sometimes respect isn't there, and I think we need to bring that back in this country.
Yeah. Yeah. And by the way, I think it's for people listening outside of Wyoming, Representative, you do not spend a ton of time in Wyoming in a legislative session. And I think that's a good thing, by the way. I mean, I think, we have legislatures all over the country that are very different. Like you have Wyoming and you're in very short sessions. And I'll ask you to talk about that in a second. And then there's other legislatures around the country that are in all year round. Personally, I believe that legislatures, when they're in session, there is a bit of a threat, right, to liberties sometimes when they're there. So I prefer that they get in, get their business done, and get home and get back to work. Tell folks how quickly the Wyoming legislature comes into session and it goes out.
Yes, so general session is 8 weeks. So basically January and February, we spend going through the general session, and we do 300 to 400 bills, working hard. And then during the budget session, it's only 4 weeks. So it's lots of 12 to 18-hour days. And we're under time crunch. So you're negotiating hard. You're calling everybody. There's no time to waste. And some bills die. We run out of time. So it's quite a process. The chairmen really have to pick the bills that they support and they feel like have the best chance of passing. So there's really no wasted time during either session. But the budget session it's a sprint for 4 weeks.
Yeah, and you have and that budget session is every other year, right? So one year you have an 8-week session, and the next year you have a 4-week session. Is that right?
That is correct.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So the governor and we talked about this a little bit. The governor did basically a line item veto. Let's talk about that real quick. What did he line item veto? And you alluded to it, but let's get specific. And then what were his reasonings for doing that?
Sure. So, we had means testing in there. So if you were at the 150% of poverty level, you got the $6,000 a year. And then as the income level went up, the amount of money available for each family went down. So if you were at 500% of poverty level, you got $600 a year. And there's the varying levels in between. He stripped out all income levels except for the 150%. So that really limits the amount of people that are going to qualify. I think 150% of poverty level is right around 46,800 for a family of 4. So anybody above that's not going to qualify. So again, we got the program off. We're going to get it running, get it set up, and hopefully expand it here in the future.
Yeah, and you're looking forward to expanding it to 200%. Is that right?
200% for sure. I mean, I think there's really strong legal backing for that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's good. And I know that you look forward to kind of doing that, next year and in future sessions. So that's great. And I'm just excited for Wyoming for taking this step. It's easier to do nothing sometimes, but in education, that's not good for our kids. So happy to see that. Vanessa, talk about, what's your feeling having gotten involved here? It didn't seem like you necessarily were planning on getting involved as you went there, but looking back on it, are you glad that you did? And what does this bill mean for Wyoming families?
Sure. Yeah, I'm so grateful that I did get involved with this, and just the learning that I've done on my end, I've been able to share with our families and with our staff as well. I'm excited to see how it unfolds in the future as well, too. I think for right now, it definitely does provide some opportunities for several of our families. And I know we have teachers that work here that it could provide some opportunity for them as well, too. So it will be exciting to watch it and how it comes to fruition in the future.
Great. All right. Well, that's awesome. Thank you, Representative. Thank you for joining us. Vanessa, thank you for being with us. And thanks for really taking this step for the kids of Wyoming. Appreciate all your hard efforts on both of your parts for this. So thanks for being with us.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having us and just kind of expanding the conversation.
Yep, you bet. All right. Well, listen, we've talked about this again, states. More and more states. It's just incredible over the last few years. And again, I think it was COVID that kind of accelerated this and people really realizing, these schools are just not every school is performing the task for every kid because kids are different. We talk about that all the time. Parents who have, more than one child, anybody who has more than one child, and I have two, I can tell you my kids aren't the same, and they don't learn the same, and they don't have the same needs at school. And so this is a way to individualize education for kids rather than for systems. So great to see Wyoming take that great step. I hope every other state in America takes that same step and gives liberty, freedom, and opportunity to the children of their state. Hey, thanks for being with us. Go out there, defend liberty and freedom. It's worth fighting for, I'll tell you that. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for listening to American Potential. You may listen to more stories from Americans working every day to expand freedom and opportunity in their communities by visiting AmericanPotential.com.